Okay, hello everyone. I will give few minutes before we start in order for as many people as possible to connect. So I'm just going to be here for a few minutes. Okay. I've seen few people are connecting. Excellent. See, many more people are connecting. So I was wondering if someone could be so kind to drop me, to write in the comments if they can hear me and see me well, please. If you can just let me know. Yes, so if you can hear me and see me well, please, if someone can please write a comment underneath and just say yes, so I get the feedback. So today is our third appointment with our top guests. In the previous weeks, thank you, Paolo. In the previous weeks, we had Ioneis. 2 weeks ago, we had a chat with Derek Griffin. And today we have another top speaker that is Ben Cormack. The appointments are not going to end today. We are going to have Ebony Rio coming up, talking about tendinopathies. And then later in December, we're going to be with Lars Avemarie for another talk. So I'm just going to give you a few more, couple of more minutes to connect. I see the number of people are increasing. So today here in the UK, where I'm calling from, is the day before the lockdown. From tomorrow, we'll start a national lockdown, the second lockdown. So the atmosphere is a little bit bizarre here, because from tomorrow, many things are going to change. So I wonder how it is in your countries. I hope the situation is a little bit better and quieter than it is here in the UK. And I actually wanted to say an extra thank you to Ben for being with us today, because tonight, as we are speaking, is the last possibility for people to go out for a pint in the pub, to go to the restaurant, because from tomorrow everything will be shut down. So Fisioscience International really appreciate the time here that you are giving to us. So I'm going to wait a couple of more minutes, and then I will introduce you our top speaker today, Ben Cormack. I just want to remind you as well that you have the possibility at any time to ask questions. So if you have any questions at any point of the conversation, please write it down in the comments, and during our chat, I will be picking a few of them, and we can ask them directly to Ben. So please, any questions, just write them down in the comments. No beer for Benny, says Laura. I know. Today is the last day to enjoy a pint at the pub here in the UK. God knows for how long, because the government says it's going to end on the 2nd of December, but we doubt it's going to be that short. So I think there are a few people already connected, so we can start. I'm going to add our top speaker today, Ben Cormack. Ben Cormack needs no introduction. I'm sure that all of you, or the vast majority of you, know who he is. He's a very, very knowledgeable and brilliant colleague. So I'm going to add him now. Hello, Ben.
Good evening.
How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. As you said, it's a little. It feels a little bit like Christmas Eve, with people rushing to get presents, and it's just a bit crazy.
It is crazy. I rushed to the hairdresser to have an haircut, and they were absolutely packed with people. So, Ben, thank you very much for being here. So, I would say that we can start, and the vast majority of the people know who you are. But I would say for the few that don't follow you or don't know you yet, can you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do, please?
Yeah. So, before this crazy stuff, I used to have this really interesting job where I traveled the world and I spoke at conferences and I got the pleasure of teaching people all in lots of different countries, about lots of kind of, therapeutic stuff. But obviously over the last few months, that's changed. I've become much more about sitting at home and doing things with my computer. But essentially, I am a musculoskeletal therapist. I run a company called Core Kinetic. Core Kinetic are an educational company. So the majority of my work now is educationally based. Unfortunately, my little clinic space that I use is in a Pilates studio, and the Pilates studio has to close. So, which is a little stressful. So although it's a wonderful environment in terms of, where it's located and these type of things, I never thought about this problem. And obviously in the UK, it's had to, things like gyms and Pilates studios and things have had to close. So I do a mixture of educational stuff online, and teaching when I can travel. I do probably about 10 hours work clinically a week, and then I'm dipping my toes into some academic stuff at the moment. We've got a paper that we've just finished up, me, Joe Gibson and Peter Stilwell, all about the biopsychosocial model that hopefully should be airing, I don't know, whenever these things get themselves together. So I do a very varied, around education, clinical stuff, little bit of academical stuff, and pretty boring, really. I also run something called the Better Clinician Project with another gentleman called Adam Meekins. You might have heard of him, the sports physio, and that's a kind of a new concept of more of a magazine style educational format. So little bits of education quite regularly rather than big heavy lumps, and it's much more about
I cannot hear you very well, Ben, at the moment.
How about if I do that? Is that better?
No. Now, fine now. Sorry.
Is it good? I'll just move the microphone. Let me turn the microphone up.
No, it's okay. It was my bad, actually. I was getting my AirPods and they connected to the computer. Sorry, my bad.
You're bad. All right, fine. I was going to say it's been good so far. I've been using it a lot.
Yeah, the connection is perfect.
Yeah, I do a bunch of different things. Keeps me busy, nice and varied, and hopefully keeps me out of trouble.
That's great. I know that you teach a lot, and you teach a lot face-to-face, and you teach a lot online as well. How are you finding this, delivering education online, teaching online your courses?
Well, I suppose for me, I would regard myself as quite a active speaker. So I like the vibe of the classroom. I like seeing the students. I like, just the whole vibe of it, and teaching online has proven to be better than I thought it would be. But I still think that we are human beings. We like to see each other. We like to meet each other. We like to see each other's faces and reactions. And I think that's super important.
That's very right. So I would go directly in media res into the middle of things, and I would start with the first questions. So we're going to talk today about pain and exercise. And the first question I wanted to ask you is, which are the messages that you want to deliver to your patients regarding the pain they are experiencing? How do you help them to make sense of their own personal and unique experience?
So I think my perspective has changed on this maybe over the last 5 years. So originally, I, like everyone else, got caught up and swept up in this, pain science, concept, revolution idea. And I think it's been enormously beneficial. But I think if you'd have asked me this question 5 years ago, I'd have told you exactly the messages that I want to give my patients. Hurt doesn't equal harm, and this and that and this. And I think over the last few years, I think I've come to the realization that I have no idea what message I'm going to give a person until I've spent time with them, I've listened to them, I've engaged with them. And I think one of the biggest problems that we have today is we have very set ideas of what we want to tell patients. And rather than kind of thinking, what do I need to tell this person? What information do I need to give them? For me, it's much more about helping people make sense of, as you put it, helping people make sense of their problem. But I think to do that, we have to kind of understand what's driving some of these thoughts, what's driving some of these feelings, what some of these thoughts and feelings are to begin with. Because I think that we can, as therapists, make quite a lot of assumptions about who that person is in front of us. And maybe we need to, just really just take a step back and say, the first thing that I want to do in any given situation clinically is have more of an understanding of who this person is and why they have come to see me. So what is this person's biggest concern? What are they most worried about? What's driving them coming to see you in the first place? Because I think we play a bit of a dartboard when it comes to information. So we throw lots of darts and we hope that we hit the right spot, whether that's the bullseye or the 20 or wherever else you're looking to hit. And I think we can do better than that. I think if we want to provide good information, we want to address concerns, we want to help people make sense of their problem, how can we do that if we don't have a sense of what the problem is to begin with? And for me, that's the next pain revolution, is to think less about what I want to tell someone and more about how do I find out what this person needs to hear. And for me, that's making sense of a problem. It's not making sense of pain, because pain isn't a generic thing. Pain's a very deeply personal thing. So it's helping someone make sense of their pain, helping someone make sense of their problem. And for me, that has to come with, really a bit more humbleness and an ability to sit back and say, I think for me, actually, it doesn't start there. The first thing that I want to do in any clinical encounter is sit back and say, how do I make this person feel comfortable? Because if that person doesn't feel comfortable, if they don't feel like they can talk to me and tell me things and actually tell me what's concerning them, then I don't think we're never going to be able to help someone scratch the itch, if you like. We can give them lots of information, but is that information going to achieve the aim that we want it to achieve? So I see a clinical encounter as an emergence. So in the same way that pain is an emergence, we have to create an environment clinically to allow information to emerge that we can use to help someone make sense of their problem. So, yeah, so I kind of haven't answered your question at all.
No, you answered that.
But do you understand? I'm not sure there's anything that I can sit here and say that is, I want someone to know this or I want someone to know that. As I said, ask me 5 years ago and I could have told you the keys of pain science. But the more I've learned or the more mistakes I've made, I've probably realized that information is only as good and as relevant if you apply it to the context. And an analogy I often use is pain science or information can be a little bit like talking to a drunk in a bar. So I'm sitting at the bar and the guy turns around to me and he's had a few drinks and he starts telling me this story about his life, about his daughter, about his wife, about his 7 failed marriages. And you sit there and you're thinking, why are you telling me this? What do I care? And at the end of the day, is that sometimes like the information that we give patients? Are they sitting there thinking, how does this relate to me? And do I really care? So for me, in answer to your question, really, if we want to help people understand their experience, then we have to some degree understand their experience. And the only way that we can do that is to create an environment between two people that enables that transfer to occur. You know, that someone feels confident enough to turn around to me and say, Ben, this is what I think, and this is what I feel, and this is what I need. And for me to be able to give information that's well received, and it creates, you know, positive engagement. So, you know, sometimes I treat the clinical encounter more and more like a completely blank slate. That I have very little preconceived ideas of what I want to do and what I want to say until I've got a guide and an idea of who this person is. Are they upset and angry? Are they shy and timid? Are they scared? You know, until I've worked these things out, I don't know if I'm going to give anything over, if that makes sense. I'm just going to sit, I'm just going to listen, and I'm just going to try and think about what does this person need to move to the next stage.
I think you've answered brilliantly. There is no book it's about putting the patient always at the center of the therapy, and to move on to a process-based therapy in which we see the patient is unique way, without applying things and throwing things at the patient. I really love the metaphor that you just used. I think I may steal it from you, use it with my patients as well.
Yeah.
So is a very good one. It is part of being human, I would say, to try to avoid at all costs what causes pain and distress, both physical pain and emotional pain, and to hold on to anything that gives us pleasure and makes us happy. So how do you help your patients understand the role of exercises? Because most of them, they say, how can I exercise if I'm in pain? Or I would love to exercise, but I cannot because I'm in pain. So how would you help them to facilitate them when their mind tries to talk them out of it?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that we have a problem with pain in today's society. I think the pain problem is one of a societal level. And this idea that the world is, you know, a pain-free place, because it's really, really not. And I fell over playing tennis 2 weeks ago, and I sprained all the tendons in my forearm, and I've had terrible trouble wiping my bum. It's been really, really terrible. So I have known firsthand how much, you know, injuring a body part can disrupt the very, very, I want to say simple things. I would say more than necessary things in your life. So I've had a really, really good lesson in how, you know, how crappy pain can be and how disruptive pain can be. But I also think that I have kind of accepted that within my life, only because probably I know that it's an injury. So it's not like a persistent pain problem. One of the problems with persistent pain is there's no timeline. There's no, this is going to heal in 2 or 3 weeks. You know, you just, if you deal with it, it's going to go. And I think that's one of the big differences. It's not the pain itself. It's what does that pain mean? So how long will it last for? Can I control it? Can I manage it? You know, and we go back to things like Leventhal's kind of common sense model of making sense of the problem. You know, knowing exactly what it is. I knew, because I have some basic understanding, that I, you know, it was a grade 2 sprain of my tendons of my forearm. There was a huge black bruise that was all down there. I kind of knew. But I think going back to your question, I don't know if we should see as something. Pain isn't something, I don't believe that isn't. I think pain is part of the human experience. And I think if you went back to our grandparents, our great grandparents, back into the history of time, I think pain at a societal level was probably more acceptable than it is today. And I think to some degree that's partly to do with the monetization of pain and this idea that we can get rid of pain, just take a tablet, take a pill. So, you know, someone somewhere will sell us something to get rid of pain. So I think there has been a societal shift as things have become monetized, as you know, as society has changed its perspective. So I think that sometimes we need to help people understand that pain isn't always something to be avoided, or it isn't always harmful, or it isn't always damaging. And it does come back to this idea of what does pain mean? And I think once people do understand a little bit more sometimes that, you know, if they do experience pain, it doesn't always lead to a worse outcome, you know, and I don't always mean just information. Often I think that needs to be experiential as well. And I think that's the big problem with just the science of pain, is we can talk to people about it, but until they experience themselves having some pain, and actually it hurts, and no one wants that, you know, or people will tolerate that at different levels, you know, that maybe it isn't going to make the problem worse. In fact, we know that pain self-efficacy is a very strong prognostic factor. So actually experiencing pain and being willing to experience pain actually leads to better pain outcomes, you know, so which is a bit kind of paradoxical to some people, you know, because we have this idea that, you know, if you have pain, you will have more pain, whereas actually having some pain may lead to less pain, right? And that's what it seems to be. And again, there may be a mix of what happens on a sensory level versus what happens on a psychological level. So not just what we feel, but how we feel about that. And I think that's important. But so I mean, answering your question, I think really it's about honest discussion. What is pain? What does pain mean? What is, you know, how does pain help us? How does it hinder us? But then also experiencing some pain and realizing that the expectations maybe don't always match the reality. And it isn't that kind of what we're doing sometimes, you know, trying to get a calibration between reality and expectation, which of course would be things like expectancy violation, wouldn't it? You know, so that people are experiencing an act and the expectation is far worse than the actual outcome. And by that, you know, we kind of update our priors or whatever kind of neuroscience is in trend at the moment. I don't know. But I think the mistake that we've made is we believe it's more about information than it is action. And I think it has to be a combination of information, therapeutic alliance, and action. And I think that's what it boils down to. In fact, people are always asking me, what should I do with this tricky patient? What should I do with this type of patient, that type of patient? And I have no idea. But I always say probably the answer for most difficult situations is to have a better relationship, because, you know, people are less, you know, they are less resistant to do things if you have a better relationship. And whether that's an action or whether it's a behavior change or whether it's, you know, some kind of acceptance of thought or some kind of cognitive restructuring. I think these things are always done in an environment that allows these things to happen. So really, I think that it's about creating that environment, isn't it? It's about, you know, helping people understand that pain is a normal part of the human experience, and we all suffer from it, whether that's explainable or unexplainable, because I've had lots of unexplained pain. I'm sure you have as well. It comes and it goes and it goes again and it comes again. And sometimes we just need to help people understand a little bit more about pain, but not always about neurobiology. That's the distinction that I want to make. Sometimes, you know, I want people to know that pain is really fucking strange and it does weird shit and it changes how it feels and it moves in locations. And actually, that's reasonably normal for pain. For me, I'm like, oh, that's normal. But for them, it's scary. It means that this is a problem. This is uncontrollable. It's ununderstandable. It's damaging. It's threatening. And I think if we can help people normalize the pain experience to some degree, not normalize it as in, you know, completely normalize it, but add some element of normality or sense making, both information, their experience, our relationship, and then finally with action. I think that tends to be how I go through that process with people.
You raised a huge amount of excellent points, Ben, really many of them. I really like the point of making pain as a normal experience again, because is something that we cannot avoid in life, both physical and emotional pain. And the Greek philosopher used to say, when life is favorable to you, just enjoy and take advantage of it. But at some point, pain will come. So bear and forbear is just a normal part of the human existence. And we have to reiterate certain way to the patient. So yes, excellent point. So you mentioned expectancy violation, and that leads us to our next questions. How useful are painful exercises, and what is the literature saying about them?
Yeah, I think what we get into, if you look at the literature and work by people like Ben Smith and things like that, it will tell you that painful exercise, whatever that means. I have no idea what that means, by the way. It's a very generic terminology. A VAS of up to 5 provides a statistically short-term benefit. But what the fuck does that actually mean, if I'm being honest? So for me, it's about helping people understand that not that it's beneficial, that it's not detrimental. I think that's the real point, isn't it? My aim is never to inflict pain on someone. I think that's a ridiculous way to view it. We should never be aiming to create painful exercise. We should understand that sometimes exercise can be painful. This is unavoidable, but it's also not detrimental per se. And I think that's really the point that should be made. Not that go do some painful exercise. What does that mean? It's more that exercise can be painful. You're loading, you're stimulating, and that can provide a real benefit for change. Stimulation gives us a response. Now, that response can sometimes be negative, it can be beneficial, or it could be not that, either or in either direction. And sometimes it can be really painful and then really get better. Have you ever noticed that with some patients? It's like for 2 days, they're in absolute agony, and then suddenly they're in no pain at all. And I'm like, I have no idea about pain. I'm going to give up. I'm going to go and become a plumber or a chef because I don't understand this job anymore. I hate it. And yeah, it's crazy, right? So I think what we need to understand that painful exercise does not lead to a worse outcome. So if you are stimulating people by moving them, by loading them, by challenging them, and you do increase their pain, that doesn't simply make the problem worse. Now, that's important because maybe it also helps us understand more about pain. Maybe patients can understand that they stimulate, they have an increase in pain, but also that pain goes away. So I always talk about painful exercise as a learning experience. How can we learn more about your pain? How can we learn more about your boundaries? How can we learn more about the dosage for you? And one of the big things that I teach is that we really, with any therapeutic input, don't know what the output's going to be. We can look at a research paper and look at a mean value or, a mean value and a confidence interval and error bars. And that tells me not that much about my patient. It tells me there's a probability if my patient looks like all these people in this study that they might get a similar outcome anywhere within that big parameter, right? Which is great. But I still don't know very much because generally when you look at exercise and confidence intervals and standard deviations, they're huge. That's just standard stuff for exercise intervention. So I think we need to say the literature tells me that painful exercise is not bad, but it also doesn't tell me how that's going to work out for my patient, how that affects them on a psychological level, how it affects their confidence, how much pain is going to be okay, how long that flare-up will last for if it does happen. So it guides us in a superficial level. But we also need to go back to that person level and say, how does this person respond? And almost that's a bit of a dirty word now, isn't it? Oh, my God, my patient response is, that's just pure bias. But it's not. It's a clinical response. And a research paper is only a clinical response, but recorded in a more, in a more scientific way, if you like. But we need to say exercise can be painful. It doesn't always lead to worse outcomes. But I don't know how that process is going to work exactly for my patient. So again, do I need to be how I apply these things, I need to do it with caution. I need to do it with a person focus. I need to do it alongside education about the process. I need to do it alongside, an honest shared decision making that enables people to be fully informed about what might happen. I had a patient last week say to me, "No one has ever told me this might make my pain worse. I thank you for that." Because, no one had ever actually said this could make your problem worse. And actually, when we delved into a bit of the history, we found out that he'd flared up from exercise before. And that's why he was hesitant about it. So I think the literature and Roger Kerry is so good at this, understanding that we have this population level data, right? We have this research, but then we also have to fit this patient into that. And they're not always simply, in the group that they've studied, they're not always simply reflected. This person is an individual, and we can make some probabilities, some assumptions from this data. What actually is going to happen, we need to be humble, we need to be prepared to adjust, and we need to do it, again, within a good relationship.
That's a very great answer, Ben. So it's very important, yes, to reiterate to the patients that a painful exercise is not detrimental, but do you think it could be actually useful and good for the patients in helping them to gain confidence while moving, considering that sometimes pain is not something we can remove or eliminate completely? So is it important to make the person confident while doing things in pain?
Yeah, but I think it's a process. I think if you take someone high fear, high anxiety, very movement averse, painful exercise is not the first place I go, right? So I always say where you start is not where you finish. And actually, you might see that throughout, and this is pain self-efficacy, this is the terminology. So you might see from day one to day whatever, that a good measure for that person might be their desire to actually engage in painful activities. It might not be to get rid of pain. It might actually be to engage in pain. But we don't see that as an outcome measure often. Often it's about VAS, NRPS, getting it down. Oh my God, pain rules everything. Whereas actually there are people where it is maybe the first step to being pain-free is to become painful and accepting of that.
That is a very good one, Ben. I really liked it. So you often talk about movement snacks and about this concept that you have cognated. Could you tell us a little bit more about what movement snacks is and why it can be very useful for our patients and for us as well?
Yeah, so I was teaching in London maybe about 3 or 4 years ago, and I was talking about movement and I was talking about a diet. So I was talking about the fact when you snack on food, it's a really easy way to take on a lot of calories without noticing. And then suddenly 2 years down the line, you're a big fat man like me. But I definitely managed to put on a few pounds. And the same concept caught my attention that if you move a little bit without noticing, you can probably build up the amount you move quite a lot overall, right? So snacking is bad for us when it comes to food, but probably good when it comes to moving. And actually, I found out not long after that I wasn't the only person to ever use that phrase, that there were a couple of people who probably used it before me. So I probably unwittingly stole it. I didn't steal it, but I wasn't the first person to think of it. Now, for me, if we talk about painful exercise, what's a really, really good way to dip your toe in the water is a little bit, is a snack, right? So I think that what we often talk about is this idea that we need to create movement habits. So for me, movement habits aren't built from going to the gym once a week for 3 hours. They're built from moving a little bit very regularly. So if we can introduce little movement snacks, little bits of movement that people can do once a day, twice a day, that get that body used to moving and hopefully building movement habits, that's going to be another way to achieve our goal of movement. And again, it's something you can't, we talk a lot about heavy loading and all these other things that people love to talk about. How many times can you heavy load a week?
Yeah.
It's not going to build a habit, is it? It's not going to, for the person who doesn't move very much, it's not going to build a movement habit that's going to benefit them. We need to be doing things regularly. We need to be doing things that don't leave us really sore, that don't leave us stiff and not able to do it. We need little bits regularly that oil the body, oil the brain, oil the endogenous opioids or whatever else we create. So for me, a movement snack fits in with movement meals or movement banquets, you know, so different days we can do different things. And again, we don't talk enough about volume and intensity, either increased or actually sometimes decreased.
Yeah, I think it's great. And actually, since I heard it from you, I use it a lot in my clinical practice. And I have to say the patients are really, really relief when they hear from the first time they don't have to do 7 exercises, 3 sets of 10, because they say, when do we have, I mean, I work in London and most of my clients work 12, 15 hours a day. And they say to me, when do I have the time to do the exercises? How can I find 40 minutes a day to do my exercises? Is not meeting the patients at their level. It's not a biopsychosocial model in practice.
There was a piece of research that came out last week by the MSK Health guys, the Australian guys, Giovanni Ferrara. I think he's a Brazilian who lives in Australia, and Chris Maher and these guys. And they did a little bit of qualitative research. Was it qualitative, or it was certainly like questionnaire based? It wasn't, you know, deep stats. But I think that they found that people are more likely to do exercise if it's shorter and based at home. Yeah. I mean, I could have told you that without doing a research study, right? Because it's called human nature, but it's good to have science. And, you know, we have to remember that you know, if you take someone that does work a lot or isn't very motivated or whatever other factors you want to bring into it, are they going to go from there to being like a runner like Derek or going to the gym like Adam? They're probably not, you know. So again, it's a person-focused approach to moving, in that what we're trying to do is say, what can this person fit into their life? What can they do? What's more likely to create a success? Now, mostly what we care about as therapists is the best, or what we believe in. So this is the exercise that I like. This is what you need to do. And that's the end of it. Whereas actually, if you look at it, what does it matter what I like? It matters what they're going to do. And for me, again, that's relinquishing this idea of, you know, that we have the answer always. Our job is to find the answer for that person within their context. And for me, actually, that's most of what I do with people, is sitting down, creating little plans, talking to them about when they can do things, how much time they have. And you know what? It's not sexy. It's really boring if you were to look at it from the outside, you know.
And it's challenging, it's difficult, it's not
and
easy.
It's challenging and difficult, absolutely. And, you know, it's like being someone's secretary in a way, you know. But for me, I think that that is the most likely way that I'm going to help this person achieve what they need to achieve, rather than everyone needs to do this this exercise because this is my bias. And I think that that's a shift in focus of how we view, you know. So you can be a therapist who walks into a room and says, this is what I want to tell patients about pain, or this is the exercise that you need to do. Or you can sit back and you can listen and say, how do I get this person from here to here in the most acceptable way possible, or the most likely way possible? And it's a change in mindset. And for me, I find that more rewarding and far less pushback. And, you know, people say my patients don't want to do what I tell them to do. And maybe that's because what you're telling them to do is a load of shit. Right? Maybe it's because what you're telling them to do, they don't want to do, you know, and maybe you need to change your ideas about that rather than just get upset with patients. I don't know. There's a different perspective. Yeah.
So there is a question from one of the listeners. I'm going to show it to you, because this question that this guy is asking is going to lead us to our next one. And is how to approach patients who have been told by doctors that they have a tear or a damage and they will need surgery. And my next question, in fact, was going to be, how important is it to provide patients with the right understanding of their situation, especially in cases in which they have very distorted belief or understanding of what is going on, because we already talked about this before in the cons of pain neuroscience education, but how important it is in case of maladaptive belief to offer the right understanding.
I think that firstly, we need to accept this is very difficult, that it's not a simple answer that Ben's going to solve, you know, this problem by giving you one strategy. Because if I could do that, I'd be a millionaire. Right? And so I think we need to accept that it's a really difficult scenario, one probably that doesn't have a really simple answer. But I think firstly, you know, we need to understand that, and there was a paper around this, wasn't there, a few years ago, talking about how doctors should approach expectations and these type of things. So I think, again, what we have to do is it probably comes back to listening to that person and what is their biggest fear. You know, what have they been told and what is their biggest fear? So, you know, we need to know more about what that person believes about their problem. What is their belief? And I think Andrew Cuff did a paper a couple of years ago talking about shoulder impingement. And so if you told people they had a piece of bone sticking into their tendon, they're going to be more likely to opt for surgery because your narrative has lent towards needing some kind of surgical intervention. And how many people get this? You know, they go to see the doctor. The doctor says, oh, you probably need surgery, but go and try some physio. You know, which is, cheers. Thanks for that. Brilliant. Yeah, brilliant. Thanks for that. So look, it's challenging, but I think we need to unpick the situation. And I think we need to say to people, you know, again, we have data that exercise and operations in the longer term can have similar outcomes. We know that in the shorter term, often exercise gets bigger improvement. Operations get bigger improvements quicker. We see the graph go like that. But also, I might ask the person, do they want to avoid an operation? You know, and if they say, yes, I want to avoid an operation, then I would say, well, this is what we need to do to try and avoid that operation. So I think it comes back again to exploring that narrative and saying, the doctor says you probably need an operation. I might say to the patient, well, do you want an operation? You know, we have an opportunity here to maybe not have one. Is that something that you're willing to engage with? And if you are willing to engage with it, then there could be a good opportunity that you don't have to have one. So I think that that's what we need to find out. Is this person willing to engage? You know, do they have information that actually they could avoid surgery, that there is data? And then again, we need to do that within an environment that people actually have trust in you. Because if they don't have trust in you, you haven't cultivated that, then you're not likely to be able to change their opinion. So again, it's not about what I tell them. Maybe it's about how we interact and how they feel before I tell them that makes that more important. But certainly my question always is, would you like to avoid surgery? If they say yes, then I will say this is what we need to do.
Thank you very much. It's a great answer to a challenging question. A question that has no always true answer, because again, there are no cookbooks or recipes. So it all boils down to the person we have in front of us. I think that from what you're saying, us physiotherapists should be improving our communication skill and our relational skills.
Yeah. And also, I think the concept of number needed to treat is important. So we know that any intervention has a number needed to treat. So that if I want to do a manipulation, it's going to help 1 in 4 people, let's say. You know, I made that number up. Don't lose your shit if you're a manipulation person, right? Smoking is probably an NNT of like 60. So that actually I have to talk to 60 people about smoking cessation to get one person to do it. So the question is, we have to appreciate we're probably fighting a losing battle, but when we do get that one success, then that's great. Do you see what I mean? That's the key. It's the number needed to treat.
Thank you very much. So you have recently tweeted actually a tweet that I was very interesting. And it says, I will read it, the idea that just do any exercise and it will help everybody is a modern myth. It often involves trial and error, failure, need for adaptation in those. type and sometimes also makes people worse. A great tool, but not magic bullet. Is a brilliant quote, and I think we've already spoken about it in part. But what are the key factors, I would say, that you consider when you have to prescribe exercise, apart from the time factor that we have mentioned before?
I think I want to know things like people's exercise history. I want to know how they've responded before. Have they had exercise as a treatment in the past? What's their perceptions of exercise as a treatment? I think a lot of these things revolve around the person again, because they're likely to be affected in different ways based on their responses in the past. We know that if I take someone who's used to weight training 5 times a week and give them a 30% intensity deadlift, it's probably not likely to have a big effect, right?
Yeah.
So I think the point is that we are looking, the point of the tweet was we are looking for population level answers when it comes to exercise. What is the best exercise? What's the best dosage? And so far, even if you pick up a Cochrane paper, we do not have that data. Some people say more duration, more intensity, but these are vague in the extreme at the moment. So I think we need to go from thinking about this at a population level to a person level. And, that needs to be done more. And that was the point of the tweet, that what we see in the research doesn't actually reflect that well people individually. It reflects group data. It reflects population level data. And we have this idea that something works or doesn't work because we confirm a hypothesis through a p-value. We've reached this significance, therefore my hypothesis is true, exercise works, which is bullshit. Because we know that what happens to this person, is not it works, it doesn't work. We have a magnitude of effect. We have a long-term effect versus a short-term effect based on different factors, dosages, etc. So the point is, the more you can understand about that person, their history, their previous responses, the more likely we are to be able to move forward successfully.
Thank you very much. And always going back to something you posted recently, I think in July it was, you wrote a beautiful blog post on self-efficacy. Literature tells us that there is a strong link between pain self-efficacy and disability in people, as you mentioned before. But you mentioned that there is not such a thing as low self-efficacy.
Yeah.
Could you explain us what you mean with that, please?
Well, the point of self-efficacy, and we're going back to the work of Bandura. And again, what really annoys me is when people talk about the biopsychosocial model or self-efficacy, and they've never actually read Engels' work or they've never read Bandura's work. They've just heard someone tweeting about it and, talking rubbish on the internet. And the point is that self-efficacy doesn't exist. In fact, Bandura said this. Bandura said, efficacy is not like confidence. It isn't something that's generalizable. It's something that's very tied into something specific. So you cannot have general low self-efficacy. You can have general low confidence because it spans lots of constructs. The point of self-efficacy that it is a singular construct, so that low self-efficacy relates to an action. It doesn't relate to your confidence around doing lots of things. It relates specifically to an action. So you could have high confidence at everything in your life, but low self-efficacy at something, right? So there's a difference there. So you said it perfectly. We see that pain self-efficacy is actually related much more to disability than pain intensity or fear. There's a couple of papers that have said that over the years. I think the first one was 2010. And the point is that's pain self-efficacy, and that's specifically measured by the pain self-efficacy questionnaire, the PSEQ. And we have the self-efficacy for exercise questionnaire, the SEE. These are specific constructs. So when you see low self-efficacy, actually what they've done is they've measured that via the PSEQ. So it relates to pain, but they haven't actually bothered to put that in the title of the paper or of the discussion. So pain self-efficacy doesn't exist in a vacuum. It doesn't exist as a general trait. Or, yes, so it's the point is it's probably a specific state, not a general trait. Does that make sense? So absolutely. A trait, yeah, so self-efficacy isn't a trait. Because you could have high self-efficacy for one thing and low self-efficacy for another, dependent on the task. It's not trait-based, it's task-based. So you could have low self-confidence, and that probably affects your self-efficacy for different tasks, but still they are different constructs.
So does it make more sense to talk about pain confidence and improving pain confidence in our patients?
Yeah, I think mostly what we work with patients is actually confidence. So most patients that come in to see me might have low confidence at using their bodies, and I help them increase their confidence at using their bodies. And maybe their pain goes down via natural history or natural waxing and waning of pain as it flares up and goes down or whatever. But I think a lot of what I do is probably affects people's confidence. That I spend time, I listen, I encourage them, I provide motivation, I take some time to actually sit with them and do stuff, and that improves their perception of their self, their confidence, and hopefully their ability to do specific tasks which we could relate to self-efficacy.
And how good is exposure therapy or soft exposure therapy, as you mentioned in your blog post, to increase this pain confidence?
Well, I think that the only way that you can increase pain self-efficacy is to experience pain. Yeah, which is exposure therapy. You know, I think that what we forget as well is exposure therapy is also really specific. And I'm sure Derek would have talked about this. Me and Derek are probably quite on the same page here. That we talk about exposure in a really broad way. That we doing a deadlift is going to help me pick up my kids, or doing a squat is going to make me better at putting on my socks. Whereas we actually know from phobia literature, it just doesn't work like that. That actually, that these things, I always say it's like taking someone who's scared of spiders and showing them a pineapple. And actually, it makes no difference, right? So there is a context to fear avoidance. There is a context to phobias. But if we dial it back, does the deadlift improve my confidence, maybe? Do you see the more general things have more general effects? Whereas more specific things probably have more specific effects. So I think we make the mistake of generalizing when we should be specific sometimes. And sometimes maybe being specific when we should generalize.
That's very right. And so I thank you for answering all these questions, because your answers were brilliant. And I would say if there is any other questions coming from the listeners, please write it down in the comments so we can ask them to Ben. Otherwise, I think I ran out of questions. I think we went through a lot of good stuff this evening. So we'll leave you a couple of more minutes in case someone wants just to pop some questions, and to remind you that this chat is recorded, so you can listen it again on our Facebook page and on our YouTube page, on our YouTube channel as well. So it stays here, it doesn't go away. I see no other questions coming up, Ben. There is a listener asking if you are more for aerobic exercises, but I think you gave already you answered this question plenty during the course of our chat.
Aerobic exercise is just another type of exercise that we can use. Again, we get into this idea that this is best and that's best. And actually, if you look at, one of the problems with hypoallergesic literature, it's often done in pain-free people, which give much more consistent responses than those with pain. But aerobic exercise is the same as strength exercise or flexibility, or it's another type. And how it affects your patient will be in your patient.
Exactly. There is one more question from Alban. I'm going to show it to you here. What is the difference between a personal trainer and another clinician, a physiotherapist? And that actually reminds me of a quote I read somewhere in the social media when they wrote that rehabilitation is training in the presence of an injury. It's a quote that I really didn't like too much.
Phil Glasgow said that.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So yeah, I don't know if that relates well to chronic pain per se. What is the well? I think there's a level of knowledge of pathology, of pain, of different things like exposure therapy, of things like fear avoidance, pain self-efficacy, how that relates to the pathologies that people have, or the concept of chronic pain, or whatever other understand. I think the difference here is a level of knowledge about how exercise fits in with pain. I think that you get lots of personal trainers who are fantastic at building people's confidence, building muscle, doing really, really good, fantastic things. I think maybe there's a difference when we actually look at the knowledge around pain, the knowledge around disease, the knowledge around comorbidity, the knowledge around pathology, these type of things. So I think there is a difference, but I actually think that there's probably a lot of similarity when it comes to good relationship building, when it comes to, creating a good environment to building people's confidence. So actually, I think there are a lot of skills that we can learn from other areas, exercise-based areas, not just thinking that, that because we have a certain knowledge of in this area that we're in some way superior. So look, again, different areas have different skill sets, but I do think there is a different understanding of pain and of pathology and these type of things.
Thank you very much. Can I ask you one more question, Ben?
You can, buddy.
Deepa is asking here if you can kindly give us a few practical examples on how to build patients' confidence.
Well, I think that really you need to make an effort to build people's confidence. If someone does think something that is positive, tell them it's positive. One of the problems we have with medical exercise is we've divorced it from humans. That, when you get a great personal trainer, they'll say, that was brilliant. Look how much you lifted. Look what a great job you did today. Right? Whereas you'll get a therapist who'll be like, because it doesn't matter to a tendon. It doesn't mean, tendons don't take compliments. Do you see what I mean? So I think if you want a practical example is build your patient's confidence. How would you build your friend's confidence? How would you build your wife's confidence or your husband's confidence? Why would it be any different from your patient? Do you see what I mean? So your patient is still a human being like your family member is. Why would you building their confidence be any different to building the confidence of a friend or a family member? We're all human beings, just to use basic human principles, which is giving a shit, telling people that you give a shit, and then actually providing motivation and, and we forget it, don't we? And all this medical jargon and central sensitization and all these other words, we forget that there is a human being who's scared with low confidence that probably just needs someone to tell them that they're okay and they're doing great.
I would clap here.
But you see what I mean? But we forget it in all the technical shit. You've forgotten that there is someone. In fact, I've done many years doing some personal training and boxing coaching and, various stuff alongside therapy stuff. And I learned more doing some of that than I learned doing some of this. And it's just being with people and exercising with people and motivating people, because there's no pressure to solve a problem. They're your job. So take some of those things, bring them over here, and you've got a great combination.
I think, as you said, is medical jargon doesn't help us a lot, because all these central sensitizations, neuropathic pain, osteoplastic pain, they leads us away from the patients and more towards the cookbook and the recipe. And
they become labels. Oh, this person, this is a neuropathic patient. No, this is Jill. She's got neuropathic pain. She also has a job. She's got 2 kids and she's scared to move right now. And that's what you need to deal with, not some cookbook about neuropathic pain. What do I tell her about neuropathic pain? We'll find out what she's scared about first.
Good answer. Can I ask you one more question?
All right, buddy. One more. And then it's wine time. Wednesday wine night.
Yes. So I will let you read. Can you read it?
From Dora.
Yes.
Whew, it's a good thing I can read. Only just, though. I only learnt last week. When it's really tricky, isn't it? Because really what Dora's asking, I suppose, is it depends on who is saying something about what outcome you get from that. So the person saying it, the person giving the education, might actually influence the outcome from that education. So it becomes really difficult. Well, I suppose the only way that you could study that is to take two types of people and then maybe have, you know, two therapists, same information, two different styles, and then compare and contrast. That might be one way to see if you have a between group difference. But, you know, I think that we also have to accept that that is part and parcel of what we're trying to do. So I don't know if I know exactly how I might incorporate that into a clinical trial. I wouldn't say I'm possibly the best person to ask. But again, you might take two therapists, two different styles, same information, you know, maybe do a crossover design or something like that. That might be interesting. But I think we need to accept that interventions are never devoid of the person applying them. And so does that become a really difficult thing to standardize? Yes. Should we look to standardize it? No, because it's also an asset. You as a therapist are an asset. You do this good stuff. You can enhance this information. If this other guy over here wants to be a dick and ruin it, he can do that. So I think we need to accept that information doesn't exist in a vacuum, that it is about the way that it's applied. Does that need to be reflected in trials? I don't know. Can it be reflected in trials? I'm not sure.
Thank you, Ben. I'm not going to steal more of your precious time. I want to say, how can people contact you should they want to?
So look, I am not shy on social media. I would never say that I'm not opinionated and loud and self-promoting. I'm all of those things. So you can find me on Twitter. You can find me on Facebook. My company, Core Kinetic. I've got a course in a couple of weeks on the 21st and the 22nd online, Saturday and Sunday morning, 9 till 1:30 both days, talking exactly about what we've talked tonight: exercise, self-efficacy, you know, person-centered approach to all of these things. If you can't, you know, the research tells us this, how do we apply that in clinic? How do we create a framework for the application? That's what I'm going to be talking about. But look, I'm talking about the same shit quite regularly. I'm pretty boring now, but I appreciate you having me on, David. I hope I've answered your questions, and I hope everyone out there has enjoyed me talking shit for an hour.
Thank you very much, Ben, and thank you all for listening and spending time here with us. On Sunday 15, we have our next appointment with Ebony and Rio talking about tendinopathies. So thank you all again, and I would say have a good night. Or good night. Or wherever you are. Bye.